All right, so cool. F5 has an opportunity in UX. One of the reasons that I joined the company is because there's so much room for maturity and growth in this part of software design. I've been making business tools primarily for about 13 years. I like a complicated puzzle. F5's got a lot of very technical content, and wrapping that up in a way that is easy to use is a difficult challenge. It's a good challenge. I like that challenge. Another thing about F5 is that the expectation for user experience is maybe here, and so with a little bit of effort we can move it up. So that's kind of a straightforward thing. You may have heard digital transformation in regards to F5. It is an official movement at F5. We are becoming a software company more and more. Application services is a big thing. You may have heard that term dropped a few times in the last couple of days. I only work on software. There's no hardware component to my projects. It's a part of this new movement. We even have a VP of digital transformation, and he gave me a quote that reinforces the need for my job, which is great. If we don't do this, if F5 doesn't transition into a user-first, user-centered design approach, then we're gonna lose out to all the other competitors that are already doing this. So I think in a lot of ways, we internally feel the pressure that we're behind on this score, and so we're going to do everything we can to catch up and then surpass your expectations and the competitors' bar. We're going to talk about how we do that. Another opportunity here is that traditionally the front end, it's been written in JavaScript. JavaScript over the last few years, several, maybe decade, I'd say, several years, it's been a crazy jungle. Lots of new technologies and frameworks and libraries and incompatibilities, and it's been very difficult to, as a company, make a bet on any one particular framework and expect that it's going to live for you for a couple of years. One of the things about business tools is that they do have to survive in the world for a long time, many years. It's not the same as like a game on your phone. So recently, JavaScript really has solidified. It's become more and more a justifiable industrial scale scripting language. TypeScript has helped a lot. Microsoft added that to the ecosystem. And then built on top of that, over the last few years have emerged React, which is a Facebook product, and Vue, which is sort of the spiritual successor of Angular. Most applications out there are written in one of these two things. So it's less risky for F5 now to make a bet on one of these frameworks and expect to depend on it for the next few years. That's a good thing. There's a lot of movement towards design thinking. This is an area of software development that has a lot of brain trust and thought leadership around it. You can get many books on design thinking. The takeaway, though, is that it's user-centered. You put the user first. No matter what you're doing, no matter what part of the product, no matter what role you're playing, the user is a part of your day-to-day. It also enforces reduction and simplification. This is good. It's less things for you to learn. It's fewer components for the product to maintain. It's difficult to make something simple, but there's a lot of tools that are out there for that. It also creates some consistency, not just for the user experience, but for the internal tools across products. You want to have as few differences from one product to the other in terms of how they're built, but also in terms of how they're delivered. It's cheaper when you have fewer things to deal with. What is going on with my screen size? That wasn't happening yesterday. That sucks. All right, well, it looks like it might just be this one. Let's see. Actually, it's kind of appropriate that that text is screwed up here because this slide highlights all the different UI just from Big IP that is screwed up. We have 3 different inputs, 5 different drop boxes, different types of validation, all within one product. I mean, F5 traditionally hasn't been consistent even within one product, let alone across other products. And as we move to create more and more software and expand our platform to cover more and more of the market, consistency is going to be very important. So there's an opportunity for us. All right, so now we're into it. What I'm going to talk about are 2 examples of how we're building a consistent and coherent UX. One of them is, I just realized what the type problem is. I've been having, that's the wrong font. So, okay, there might be some issues, but we'll deal with it. All right, 2 things I'm going to talk about. Design systems. This is really a technical example. Design doesn't really sound technical. It's artsy, silly, but it really is code. And then there's some practices here. How do we stay user-centered? All right, let's get into the design system. I'm really bummed about that font. All right, so the design system is built out of these 5 things. I'm going to talk about each one of these, what they're for, why a design system is useful. Anybody familiar with a design system? Maybe an example? Can you think of one that you might have heard of, maybe from Google? Like material design, have you heard of that one? If you have an Android, everything in that experience is defined by Google's material design system. And basically every major software company has one of these. F5 is working on it. And this is how. So it starts with a foundation. You need to make some big choices early on with your design system. Things like accessibility. Will you support accessible interfaces or not? Will you be Section 508 compliant? Here's a couple of screenshots from the design system that we're building on one of the projects that I'm on, and what this does is it automatically checks for readability and contrast ratios. Put in your colors from the brand, and depending on what you set as foreground and background, you may pass your contrast or you may not. For example, not a great idea to put red on black. It doesn't pass. Another part of the foundation is the typography. Our design system here, it uses real math to calculate all the sizes of every typeface or every element, H1, H2, just based on the base font size. What this does is it provides vertical rhythm, a consistent layout that's automatically inherited no matter how you lay out your page. All right. There are also some design principles that go into this. So, do you want your interface to feel open or, more constrained? Some of those guiding principles you can use as you go through your design process. So, as you're evaluating one layout versus another, you can ask, does this feel open? Does this work? Does this meet our guidelines? All right, so moving up from there is code. Design system is a product. It's written in code. This is a bit of React here. The value of this is that it's maintained in a repo just like any other product. It's versioned, it's tested, it's linted, and any fixes done to that central design repo are automatically inherited by all the products that consume it. So it's a centralization, and it's very easy for a product development team to get behind something like this because it's familiar. It's not just a bunch of paint, silly design stuff. It's a real product. Oh man, it's killing me. Okay. Yeah, all right, so how that code manifests itself is in a bunch of components that we can use to, like Legos, to build the product. All this stuff is consistent within the design system. Every product that consumes this will be 100% consistent with each other. There's some other things in there that also help with the layout and paging, templates, that sort of thing. But when you have a toolbox to go to, you don't have to spend money on building the toolbox. It's already there for you. All right, go to the next page. Editorial guidelines. This one's about the words. A lot of people, when they're using a product, don't actually read the words. That's not uncommon. But when you do choose a vocabulary and you do choose a tone, you have to stick with it. It's a big part of the user experience. Is your product familiar and friendly, or is it very businesslike and technical? If you're not sure, then you're going to have writers that just kind of dictate their style onto the product, and now you have another layer of inconsistency. There's some other stuff in terms of documentation processing. This is a screenshot from our Swagger documentation. Our APIs are self-documenting for some of our emerging products. And what that means is that part of the build process produces the API documentation. So every time we make an update or a change to the API, the documentation automatically gets updated. That might be helpful if you're learning an API. Big part of the user experience. Users aren't necessarily constrained to the product that they're working in. User experience spans a lot of your day and includes any part of an interaction with a product, even if it's in API documentation, or help, or online, or support, etc. So the last piece is the brand identity, and this is like the frosting on the cake. The brand can change and will change over time. And a design system that abstracts the brand away from the components and behavior is set to inherit and adapt to the brand as it changes. F5 just released a refresh to the F5.com, and that included a pretty significant upgrade to the brand guidelines. So our design system example here is ready to inherit that, very low cost. Buttons still behave as they did before. Now, though, they have a slightly different tint. Okay, make sense? Pieces of a design system. Okay, we have 2 of them coming out. These are really driven by product need. This is not something that we're investing in just for fun. In order for us to deliver a consistent experience, we have to have these things. Otherwise, even if they're consistent for a moment, if they're handcrafted, over time they're just going to split. So the 2 systems that we have is, one is built for Big IP, Big IQ. This is built in Vue, which is most of the UI in those 2 products are Angular, traditional Angular. Vue, like I mentioned earlier, is an extension of that. This defines everything that we need in order to build new UI, bring new features. And some of this has already been applied in the latest updates to these products. Less mature, but possibly more applicable is a new design system. This one's React-based, and we're applying this to as many of our incubation projects as we can. Even one product using a design system will pay for the investment. The basic system that we built took about 6 weeks, a team of 5. It's not cheap, but it will pay for itself. And then when you get 2 products using it, it's a no-brainer. And as we deliver more and more of these things, it's going to be required that the design system is a part of the product work. There's a lot of benefits to that. I'm going to get to those. Sounds expensive. it's not cheap. I mean, it's not free. But the alternatives are continuing to deliver a subpar user experience. Like, that's not an option. We're going to lose if we keep doing that. The cost, though, is saved in other areas. So when you have a single source of truth, you can fix a bug or add a feature, and all the systems that have taken all the products that have taken a dependency on that design system automatically inherit that. You don't have to have as many single solutions, single fixes. It's all centralized. This saves a lot of time and money because the designers can focus on applying the toolbox to solve their business problems, and they don't have to worry about defining the button and defining, that stuff is almost annoying because it should be just a given. So when you have to go through the process of building all that stuff up front and laying it out and deciding how many pixels here and there, it really is a waste of time. So when you have a design system in place, the designers can just apply that design system to solving the business problem. And the devs too. They don't have to craft these buttons one at a time. They just call the button, there it is, and they can spend a lot more of their time actually delivering products for you instead of just getting started. Guarantees consistency. I think this is obvious. It's 100% consistent. There was some questions. I was talking about this yesterday, and some questions. How consistent is it between one product and another? And I mean, it is completely. It's a very positive outcome. And this decreases maintenance cost. Like I said, these products have to live for years. And even if you build them to be two different products to look the same on day one, as you add features and the product matures, they're going to grow apart unless they are pinned to the same system. These things are products for product teams, just like it says. Our design systems have their own repos, they have their own support teams, and one of the ways that this is valuable is because the product is built for people that know the value of this, right? So if you're a front-end developer and you don't have to spend your time on defining all this, you can just draw from the well. It makes you a happier front-end developer, which results in better products. All right, so that was the rundown on design systems. Next is some more of the user experience stuff that is non-technical. So this is process stuff. This is some of the tools that we use. A lot of this has been in practice for years. Another advantage of F5 is that we don't really have to invent. We're kind of late to this game. And so as long as we follow the best practices, we're really assured a good outcome. All right. So I'm going to talk about 5 tools. One of them is personas. We have we've had personas at F5 for a number of years. Big IP uses them. We've gone through a recent refresh to create some new personas and expand some old ones for our emerging products. How many of you guys have used personas ever? No? Have you ever heard of them? No? Excellent. Awesome. All right. Well, so what is this thing? A persona is the result of some research. So F5's gone ahead and paid for a body of research that has identified Olivia, for example. She's enterprise DevOps engineer. We know what she cares about, we know what she hates, we know what she likes, we know how she solves problems, how she likes to work, how technical she is in different areas, how much of an influencer she is, what her personality is like. And all of that research covers a lot of ground. It's difficult and sort of cumbersome to explain that in a 30-minute meeting where you need to come up with a design for this feature. So personas are like a shorthand for all that. Instead of describing all of that and defining the user over and over again, we can just talk about Olivia. Everybody knows what we're saying, and it's much faster. We can actually produce work quicker, which is good for you. It doesn't have to be just an end user either. We have April here. She's actually an F5 employee. She works for support. And the reason that she's a persona for our products is because if we can make her life easier, it therefore is easier for the users, and it also saves F5 money. If she doesn't have to spend half a day solving a problem, she can just turn it around in 5 minutes, then that's much, much better for everyone. This also expands out to include some other personas. So for example, we have this, what we call a customer profile up here, Acme Financial. This is a global financial corporation. We looked at a lot of our financial customers and kind of aggregated them into this, this company persona. We have a number of these that go from, huge global financial corporation all the way down to startups. And we have Olivias that can work across that spectrum. And depending on which company they're working for, that Olivia might have access to different tools, different teams, might solve problems in different ways. And then we can also build products that are specific to certain ecosystems. And another adaptation of the persona is a topology here. So this is describing a relatively simple cloud environment. We have, similar to the customer profiles, we have a range of these things that go from simple to very complicated. This has been really useful because we can target the simple first. Let's just make it work. Let's make our new product work there. And then we can plan to move up and increase complexity as we go. All these things work together, and it saves a lot of time day to day for the product development teams, which means we can actually deliver stuff to you quicker. Journey maps are another tool that we use. These are relatively new to user experience, the last 5 years or so. The gray one here is like the classic example, I would say, where what it does is it tells a story, all the people involved, how they feel, and how they're interacting with your product. These are built similar to the persona. You go out and exercise that journey over and over again, and you kind of aggregate it into an average persona journey. Sorry. But this can be adapted too. So the product that I'm on, we took it and made it into more of a workflow. And what this does is it really speaks to the logical progression of the technology and calls and everything that needs to happen in the front end, the back end, and the user. And so it's been great because it brings a lot of different roles together to agree on a big vision for the product. We had architects, program managers, product owners, all of our leadership. We ended up with about 12 of these, and that covered absolutely everything we could imagine could be possible with the product that we were working with. So far, I think we've really coded up about 4.5 of them. So there's a lot of, these things are pretty high level. Each one of the boxes there can be kind of double clicked on and expanded out into a little mini workflow. Sometimes it has to do with a portal or a graphic user interface. Sometimes it's just an API call. All this, though, has to be backed up by research. If you just say that this interface is better than that one, and it's your opinion, even though it's your professional opinion, if it's very different than the traditional way things have always been done, you're going to get a lot of backlash. It's very difficult to get the best user experience through. So you back it up with data. You can't argue with data. Developers in particular really like the quantitative proof that research like this can provide. I put 3 examples up here. These go through different levels of altitude. At the highest altitude, we have focus groups. We've run a number of these for our new products. This really vets the product ideas. Are we on the right path here? Does this idea sound valuable to you? Does this solve a problem for you? We've traveled all over the place. We're actually running a focus group here later today, to continue to test some of that. What it does is it gives you reduced risk. If you have a new product idea, you want to take it to market, collect some of your target audience together and run it by them. And if they're excited and they want to sign up for the beta, then you know you're on the right track. If they're confused, then that's also really valuable. You need to pivot. It's almost just as important to know if you're wrong than it is to know if you're right. It really doesn't matter which. You just need good data. Once you're on the right track, though, you can dig into the card sort. What this does is it organizes concepts, creates a hierarchy, lays out the flora and fauna. Who are the parents? Who are the children? Does it make sense to, where would you go to find load balancers in this hierarchy? Where would you go to find users? And then when you have that laid out, you have an information architecture. From there, you can actually build an interface. So you can create prototypes, test those, and the prototyping and the research usability that goes along with that is a part of our Agile process. So every time we need to deliver a product or a feature within a product, we'll come up with some options and run some basic usability to make sure that we're choosing the right one. Now, all this research is just one input. A lot of times, believe it or not, users don't really know what they want. That's partly because they're influenced by what they know, and it's difficult to change what you're comfortable with. So research is just one avenue, one channel into the product process. It's not the only thing. If you only listen to your research, then you would be building something. You'd be building the wrong thing well, I suppose. All right. Iterative development is another very important thing. Agile really reinforces this. Traditionally, things have been more or less waterfall. You build everything out, drop it off the cliff, and if it hits the market, then you're lucky. If you miss, it's a very expensive miss. So iterative development allows you to make tiny little bets, and if you're wrong, you're only wrong by a little bit. You go back and change it, go back out, move forward. Agile really reinforces this. We run on 2-week sprints, so we're only going to be wrong by 2 weeks at most. The final bit here is telemetry. So this really applies to mature products. So some of the incubation stuff hasn't reached this point yet. But what telemetry does is it sits in the product in the field. And anonymously, et cetera, it will collect some usage data. Are the users hitting that button down there? We think they should. We expect they would. So are they? If it turns out they're not, that data comes back to product development directly. We can move the button. Let's put it up at the top. Put it with the other buttons. Why wasn't it there before? And then through the continuous delivery cycle, 2 weeks later, the product hits the market again with the button fixed, and now we can measure directly that 80% of our users are actually finding what we expect. It takes some work to get to this point, but when you do, you have a very rapid, close relationship between the actual users and the people that can fix it for you. All right, what's next? The great thing about this approach is that no matter what role you're playing, all your effort gets focused on the user's positive user experience. Even if you're a dev that doesn't like this kind of thing, your work is still helping to build the best possible UX. All right. That's that. Keep going. Okay. So what I need from you is higher expectations. I need you to remember that F5 is headed in this direction, and you should set your expectation very high for us. when this comes back through the chain, through your contacts back into F5, it's going to help us build, it puts more and more pressure on us to deliver what we think we should, which is the best possible UX for you. So I need you to recall this, demand more, expect more from us. We are certainly working quickly to deliver this out to market as soon as we can. And so with that, I'll thank you. Any questions? Yeah, sure.
So with all this, is there any plan to bring the Big IP, DNS, and Big IQ platforms kind of like closer? Because they're very divergent as of right now.
Yes, there are plans. There's some technical constraints on those two products just because of the architectures, the front-end architectures that have been chosen over the many, many years. But the design system should, over time, incrementally converge that stuff together. Now, it is subject to priority, and we can't just go into both of those products and spend all the time and money to make them unified. But as features are added and as bugs are fixed and that sort of thing, then we're going to seize on those opportunities to also pay the cost of bringing them closer together. So, specifically, I don't know the answer to that, but in general, that's the idea. Yeah. I don't. I know who to ask though. So let me find out. Yeah, sure.
When do you expect us to start seeing these changes?
Well, some of the Big IP stuff has already hit market. Our incubation projects are really where the newness is going to come. Some of those are scheduled for beta later this year, but that's a very select group of customers. It's a careful rollout. Next year, I'd say for general audiences. Mm-hmm.
Are these going to have separate revisions from the back-end functionality, and it's going to be packaged as one image, or are you actually going to be upgrading the interface separate from the back-end?
They are complete products. Yes. I mean, they're not always images. They could be, partly hosted and whatnot. But yes, right. Yeah. Sure.
I have two questions.
Sorry, anyone.
Integrating AI or ML into this, like you mentioned about telemetry.
Yeah. AI and ML. Yes. Data science, definitely. There's a lot that in terms of pattern recognition, health monitoring, that stuff is easy for machine learning pattern recognition. But we have to iterate to that. There's a significant upfront cost to just dropping that into a product. So just like the design system, the thinking there is that we would want to create a central product that others can take a dependency on. So we have the F5 brain, and then what that will do is, for example, if it's providing application health monitoring, the definition of that would be consistent across all the products that include application health monitoring as a feature. Yeah.
Second question.
Sure.
Is this going to include client? Because I work with a company that uses Big IP edge client quite a bit, as well as the F5 access client for iOS devices.
Okay.
Is that going to change at all? I know the F5 access client for iOS will have more things, but
I don't know the specific answer on that product in particular. I think that with anything that's out in the field, if it's working well, then there isn't a lot of drive to change it. I mean, we're not going to change stuff just for change's sake. There also has to be a business driver in order to invest in this stuff. So if those are problems for you, then I would ask you to expect them to be kick-ass instead of okay, and let us know, because your feedback is a part of this process, and a lot of the stuff that I've talked about creates that feedback loop. And the closer we can get the user and product development, the better. That means we can solve your problems quicker. We can learn where we're screwing up quicker. All that. So with those two pieces of software in particular, I would say that if you have issue with their user experience, then to capture that somehow and let us know. I'd be happy to talk with you after if you want to show me what's up. All right. Okay, cool. Thank you all for coming. I really appreciate it.